Hello everybody, I'm back again. Driving to Utah for my Wasatch 100 race, and a good opportunity to catch up with all of you. And another way to also reintroduce myself, since some of you might be seeing this podcast on my website and you're not part of my coached athletes, as well as some of you have asked for it to be a subscription-based podcast, so that maybe soon I'll be putting it on iTunes or Stitcher or something to grab the podcast. So I'm Chris Hauth. I'm otherwise known as AIMP Coach to many. And this is the weekly word pod blast. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get some value out of it. And I look forward to catching up every few days with all of you, based off your feedback, based off your emails, based off your texts, based off of other ways that you're providing input on what you would like to hear on this podcast. Someday I'll be going into all the details and background of how I started coaching, how I became interested in this field, what pulled me into it, and why. But for now, I definitely wanted to thank you all for the positive feedback from last week. I'm excited to do this pod blast every week, and please share it with others if you like it or if you want to. And like I mentioned, it's soon going to be on a subscription-based platform. Not sure which one that's going to be yet, but iTunes seems to be the most popular request. I will always want to start the pod blast of this week or this current episode with some follow-up from the last episode, because I've received feedback or some questions and I feel they would be well answered early on. Last time we talked a little bit about different types of shoes and why we want to switch them out from padded, super padded shoes to more regular running shoes with regards to the depth and how your foot is in those padded shoes. So one of the things we talked about, or I discussed, was we want to switch out the shoes in order to keep our foot strong, as well as rotate through a variety of different shoes with a variety of different padding in order to keep strengthening the foot. So the question that I received was, why are you not telling us more on how to strengthen our feet? And that's absolutely true. I should be telling you that. Some of the ways we can strengthen our feet you might have heard of, whether that's massaging your foot on a lacrosse ball, which is pretty hard, and it's also quite big, so it's a little bit harder to get into some of the deep spots. But that massage and the hard surface or hard aspect of a lacrosse ball is very good for really getting into the plantar, really helping to move this foot side to side and strengthening the ankle as well as the plantar, the foot beds, and so on as we're massaging through. You can add more and more pressure, weight to it, so that eventually your foot gets quite strong, that you can carry your entire body weight basically on your foot massage. This works really well with the tennis ball, of course, too. Some people deflate them slightly, whether that's an older tennis ball or they put a pin needle in them to deflate it that day while they're using it. You can also use a golf ball, anything to get into the plantar, get into your foot, get into your heels, foot beds, work all the way around, not just one side, not just in the middle, but also balance your feet side to side on it. So let's say you have the tennis ball or lacrosse ball under the outside of your foot or the inside of your foot, and really work on your ankle flexibility around that as well. Many of you have probably heard of that. Calf strength, of course, is always very helpful, whether it's for your Achilles, for your calf, whether it's calf raises. The piece of calf strengthening exercises as well as the entire foot strengthening exercises, you want to focus on some lateral movements too. So we do so much running forwards and backwards and the foot landing on the heel and rolling off the big toe as well as any toes. You want to work your way around the foot and also strengthen from side to side. So also with your calf raises, don't just focus on one type of calf raise. To work on the entire foot. So some of this could be done via bounding exercises or downhill running in order to really plant the foot strong and strengthen that ankle. Lastly, running barefoot is really helpful. Obviously not a lot of miles, but getting some sprints as well as some drills as well as some high knees and so on grass going barefoot as well as on sand. Sand works great too. Be very careful on sand because there's a lot of other stressors that come from running on sand. So whether that's you're taking a long walk on the beach, sounds romantic, I know, but long walk on the beach in order to just really dig your feet into all the different surfaces that are coming up, and it's not even, so that really helps to strengthen your foot, as well as some drills, as well as some short jogs in deeper sand, softer sand, harder sand, and so on. Stay away from banking it too much by the water. That's not going to be as helpful because the damage you might be doing on your ankles or on the inside of your shins and so on might be too stressful. But walking and easy jogging in the sand occasionally, maybe once a week, sometimes even twice a week, if you're well used to it, is very helpful. Something I do quite often is write the alphabet with my feet, or do some real strong, powerful circles in clockwise and counterclockwise directions. So that means in the morning or in the evening, really over-exaggerate writing the alphabet with my pointed toe. So the extended foot, toes pointed away from me, and I'm writing the alphabet all the way through, switch to the other foot, and then also do some circles, whether it's counterclockwise or clockwise, really to get some mobility as well as engagement and flexibility out of our foot joint, ankles, and connecting to that, what's happening in our foot. All right, so there we have that piece with regards to the questions I received from last week on how to strengthen the foot. So going into our topic for this week, I've received a variety of questions over the last few weeks about how I'm preparing for this 100-mile run, the Wasatch 100, not only for the distance, but also doing it anywhere from 5,000 to 11,000 feet as we run through and over the Wasatch mountain range. This being my second 100-miler, I have a lot of input, notes, and experience from my last training build-up. So I definitely wanted to take a lot of the positives from that, make sure I'm repeating some of the things I learned, as well as some of the things I observed in order to improve upon them. And from there, too, I wanted to continue to apply basic principles of our endurance training, whether that's aerobic Z2 training or how we recover. As you all have heard from me so often, this training that we do, whether it's getting ready for an Ironman triathlon, a 70.3, an Olympic distance, a 10K swim, a marathon, a half marathon, any type of endurance event, the main focus of our training is to stay healthy. So no matter how many miles you're looking to achieve, no matter what kind of result you're looking to achieve, or even what kind of training volume you're looking to achieve. The key through all of it is staying healthy. If you can stay healthy in your training, it allows you to continue to grow your fitness as well as continue to progress forward on all the things you learn with the greater training volume. So that ties it back to the entire aerobic Z2 concept, and that is the more volume you can do, the more you're learning about yourself, your nutrition, your strategy, your ability to recover, and therefore how you can train smarter. Increase that training volume, again, staying healthy through that. Once again, it just continues that cycle of, wow, this is how I react to a 16-hour training week. This is how I react to a 20, 25, 30-hour training week. Sure, it might not get that big for many of you, but the principles remain the same. Seeing how your body recovers, how quickly it recovers, and how it can handle the volume of endurance training. So many underestimate the value of what they're learning, what they're observing as they progress in their endurance. Once again, in order to do that, you have to be healthy. As you get fitter, as you get stronger, you become a lot more aware of how your body reacts to all the training. And so many times from many of you, I've received emails weeks and weeks, months later, that they suddenly start understanding why we started so slow, why we did what we did, why I sort of forced them into keeping this low heart rate, steady state training going for hours upon end, no matter how frustrating it was, because what they're learning and what they're observing at that phase of training, once they're absorbing and handling that type of volume, whatever event they're getting ready for, that type of volume, that allows them then to become smarter athletes and then train smarter and better on the next phase of training. You can't jump ahead to a better phase of training without being injury-free, without having put in the work or the hours or the miles in order to understand your body better, in order to understand your schedule better, and so forth. So even with 100-mile training, and I've done this before, many times before, I still think of those original concepts that I'm looking for even for myself. Am I staying healthy? Am I progressing? How is my recovery working? I started off in the spring preparing for the Boston Marathon. So that was getting ready for 26.2 miles. And it wasn't supposed to be some fantastic marathon time, knowing that I have a long season of running ahead of me. Instead, I focused on the pounding of the pavement, my ability to run 26.2 miles well, to enjoy a long weekend in Boston and really soak up the experience, and to come out of that training block for Boston healthy and ready to then grow into a training block of a 100-mile race. The pounding of the pavement for a road marathon like Boston was very helpful. It got my legs ready to gradually increase the miles from my average weekly mileage pace from Boston to where I want to be in my build up and then peak for Wasatch 100. So post Boston, after a week or two of recovery and time off, I first focused on running a 50K well. This is all in training. It doesn't mean I was applying these concepts in a race. It was more my ability to run a 50K on trails, so about 32 miles, and recovering quickly from them. Not being sore after a day, ready to train the next day, ready to run again the next day, 10 to 12 to 13 miles of feeling decent. Of course, there's some wear and tear on the body, but that I've recovered quickly, I've absorbed it well, I'm healthy, no niggles or injuries, and therefore I can continue to put a load on my body the next day or in the following days post a 50K. Believe it or not, after the marathon, despite it being 26.2 miles, it took me about 6 weeks to get my training and my recovery up to where I wanted it to be to absorb a 50K. So only 6 miles further, but on trails, the downhills, the uphills, the pounding, I was not recovering as quickly as I was looking for. And so it took a solid 6 weeks in order to get there. Once I recovered from that, I had the intention to keep running a 50K a week all the way through my next big recovery block, because then I knew post that recovery block I would switch my training over again to focus on over distance. 6 weeks post Boston put me into mid-June before I was able to run a 50K. And then through the rest of June and most of July, I ran a 50K a week as I gradually increased the volume of running around that 50K a week. So let's say I progressed from maybe 60 miles to 70 miles a week in the beginning with the other workouts around that 50K to about 85 to 90 miles by the end of July. Again, a very gradual build. There's some recovery weeks in there where I pulled back to maybe 45 to 50 miles that week. But the nice thing was I was still training every day, even on my recovery weeks, because I really enjoyed swimming on my recovery days. Then in early July, I started my over distance focus. And what that means is I wanted to get in 100 miles of running in a shorter and shorter time span. So whether that's from 7 days, so 100 miles in a week, into a 5-day window, into a 4-day window, even into a 3-day window. So 3 days, 100 miles is a solid amount of running because you're running about a 50K a day. And while that's broken up a little bit differently, it still leaves very limited recovery time, and I wanted to be very careful that once again, I'm not getting injured, that I'm not breaking myself down too badly, and that an injury creeps up in 3-4 weeks from now versus feeling good on that over distance training week. So in August, I had 3 big over distance weeks. One was about 103 miles. The other was about 118 miles. And finally, the biggest one was just under 130 miles. Within those weeks, I still maintained some speedier runs, as well as tried to keep my cardiovascular intensity to the pool as well as the cycling workouts that I coach. So the long, steady runs were obviously on trails up on the mountain close to me on Mount Tam here in Marin County. And then during the week, I would also teach 2 cycling classes, indoor cycling classes on CompuTrainer, so that I can get my heart rate really high and really work on some intensity, fast twitch, high cadence work, just to get the muscles firing way quicker than the steady, slow grind pace of ultra training. And then I would still swim 3-4 times a week, not only to reconnect with my body and lengthen out my stroke, but the lighter aspect of gravity in swimming in the pool felt really good to work on lung capacity as well as also more aerobic capacity without any type of pounding on the legs. There you have it. That puts us into early September, at which point I started to taper. Today is September 8th, or no, today's September 7th. And as I'm driving out to Utah, I had an off day yesterday from running. Easy jog on Monday, Labor Day. And when I get there this afternoon, I'll go for an easy run. And that's it. that'll be all the training before I go into the race on Friday morning at 5 a.m., getting ready to run 100 miles. Different than my last build-up were a few things. One is that I didn't do a race in prep for this 100-mile run. I probably could have done a 50K or even a 50-miler earlier in the summer, but schedules and recovery and how I wanted to train didn't line up very well. So instead what I did is I worked it around kids' life vacation schedule. One of them being a 50K up in Tahoe, so most of it above 7,000 feet, cresting to about 9,400 feet. Then I did a 42-mile run, again up in Tahoe, up in altitude, to really see how I'm responding to the altitude as well as running 42 miles with that type of elevation gain and pounding. It was also quite hot that day, so that gave me a sense of how I would fare in the heat at altitude. And then finally I did a 52-mile training run a couple weeks ago down here at sea level, but that was good because I went further than I've ever gone on a training run. Since it wasn't a race, it takes a little bit more planning and prep, and the nice thing, I was also able to run with most of my crew members who will be pacing me at Wasatch. So we got to talk, work through all the details, and we all feel pretty good that we know what we're doing come the real deal on Friday and 100 miles. What else did I do different this time on my ultra training and 100-mile training? Last time I cycled a lot more. I went through weeks and weeks of cycling, very little swimming. I even did a coast ride, I think 2.5 weeks prior to my last 100-miler. It was a great way to keep the endurance really high with 6 to 7 hours of cycling a day at a low heart rate without any type of pounding. But I also feel that it might have left me a little bit tired because I wasn't used to that type of cycling. We'll only know more about that based off of this taper and how I did things differently. And as you just heard, I swam way less last time. This time I kept my swimming volume up around 12,000 to 14,000 yards per week and really worked in keeping connected to the pool and really focusing on maintaining that lung capacity, cardiovascular strength in the pool versus on the bike. And this volume buildup was slightly more than last time, not much, maybe 5%, but again, a lot more time in the pool and a lot less time on the bike. And finally, with regards to this prep, the recovery weeks worked out way better, just because our summer vacation schedule was such that I had the kids for a week and then I didn't have them for a week. So the weeks I didn't have my kids because they were with their mom, worked out that was a great week to increase the volume and do some over distance. The weeks that I had the kids, guess what? That's a perfect recovery week, or at least backing off that type of volume. We had 2 true vacations where we're out of town, where running like that was just not possible. And so it worked out to be 4 or 5 days of complete rest and lounging around and sitting around and doing nothing. So we're getting right to the length of where I want these pod blasts to end. We're at 23 minutes. And while I'm driving through the desert, I can obviously talk for hours on end. I just wanted to give you all the update of that we're getting onto the far reaches of how long I want this podcast to go. What's remaining, I'm going to go through my race nutrition and hydration. Hopefully all of it applies to all your endurance endeavors, because I think it does. And maybe within that description, I'll talk a little bit more how it differs from triathlon and so on. I'll go a little bit through my race strategy and how it'll work. And I'll also talk about my nerves and what I'm thinking of going into this quasi-race. Anytime you're doing something that's 24, 27, 30 hours, I don't know if I would quite call it a race, but anyway, there's the update. Continue listening if you feel like it. Okay, so we left off knowing how the training went, what I did, how I went about it, what was different this time. And so here I am, approaching Utah, driving through the Nevada desert, and I'm healthy. I don't think I have any type of injury issues. As many of you have heard over the years, whether you know me closely getting ready for Kona or you've heard me talk about it, we all seem to get some phantom injuries right before a race, whether that's 2 weeks out, 10 days out, or the day prior. Little niggles that we want to make a bigger deal out of. So, of course, I have some, oh, my ankle this, or oh, my shins or that, but I have a feeling, I'm pretty confident that on race day, those will be gone, and the pain, the numbness of the first 30 miles being in my legs will take care of that. 100 miles. What's the race nutrition, hydration plan for something like this? I would say the main difference, as many of you might have read about or have heard in the ultra community, is because the running pace is so slow and you're doing so much hiking, especially at this race where there's 28,000 feet of altitude gain. Some say 24,000, others say 28. I'm going to exaggerate on the far end and say it's 28,000. Hopefully when I'm driving back, I can give you an accurate update on what my Polar GPS watch told me. Since I'll be starting out at quite a comfortable pace on Friday morning at 5 a.m., I'll eat a fair amount driving down from Park City to the race start. We have about 45 minutes there, but I'm not going to go overboard and look for a certain amount of calories like I would in an Ironman. In an Ironman, I usually try to get down about 1,200 to 1,400 calories in the 2 hours prior to the race. I usually like to have my breakfast complete about 90 minutes prior to the swim start, so I have some time for that to digest and settle. But for this, I'm not going to go quite that aggressive, so I'll get some food in me, but it's 100 miles, especially the first 7 to 11 miles of this race. We're gaining 5,000 feet in altitude, so it'll be a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, and as I'm going, I'll continue to stay on the calories. Another difference would be in an Ironman, since we're swimming an hour to an hour and a half prior to getting on the bike, we don't really have a chance to eat and start off the day with light nutrition and just keep the maintenance of eating and calories going to keep the deficit from even establishing itself. So here I have the opportunity just to nibble on food right from the very beginning. In an Ironman, obviously we can't, since you can't do that while swimming, or you can, but you don't really have an interest in it during Ironman swim since you're sort of in a rush. Low intensity running, lots of hiking allows all ultra runners to eat a lot of solid foods. I won't be moving to any type of astronaut food unless it's to supplement regular food, real foods. So astronaut foods to me are gels and chews and any type of drink that has too many calories in it. There's no need for that here. And if I'm falling behind on nutrition or I'm too far between a significant aid station where I can get some real calories, I might throw down a gel or nibble on some chews that I have with me. But beyond that, it is going to be all real food. Anything from sandwiches. I like ham and a little bit of cheese because ham is pretty salty, or even turkey and a little bit of cheese. Sometimes with butter, sometimes with hummus, on whole wheat bread, sort of the softer, less grainy whole wheat bread, because again, it's easier to chew and eat and get down and get those calories in. It's going to be quite dry, quite hot at times during this race, and quite cold as well, but all of it quite dry and at altitude, so eating something will always require a little bit of cotton mouth and trying to get the food down before you wash it down with some water. My last 100 miler, I averaged about 225 to 250 calories an hour. I remember there needing a little bit more calories and being hungry coming into some of my larger crew aid stations. So this time I'm going to start off a little bit higher, closer to the 300 calories an hour range, and work from there. If that falls and dips below 300, so that I'm at 250 to 275, I know I'll be fine. I was last time. In my last 100 miler, I felt great, energy-wise, body-wise, alertness-wise, until mile 98. At that point, I said, I'm ready for this to be done, which luckily then only had 2 miles left. But again, a little bit more calories is the goal this time. My biggest worry for this race, as my crew knows, and we talked about this past week, is hydration. My last race, my last 100 miler, was at sea level in Texas. Well, maybe not at sea level, but at 50 feet. And then I ran over a dam that was maybe 75 feet. So pretty flat. And this will be at mainly 7,000 to 10,000 feet. So dry and hot in a lot of locations and a lot of the race, So staying on top of the hydration that I'm not used to is my biggest focus, worry, area that I want to stay on top of. What does that mean? That means probably 30 ounces of water fluid per hour. When I say fluid, I rarely take in an electrolyte drink that's too strong. So I do primarily GU Roctane. It says to do 2 scoops per bottle on a normal serving. I do less than that, a little bit more than 1 scoop, but definitely not quite 2 scoops. So usually 1.5 scoops. And that'll probably be every 3rd or 4th bottle. If I'm feeling way off and I feel like I need more electrolytes, I will definitely quickly drink a bottle of GU Roctane to catch up, and hopefully that'll make a big difference. So in doing simple math for this race, for let's say 25 hours at 300 calories an hour, that is quickly 7,500 calories for this race. So it's a lot to carry, not on me, obviously. There's plenty of great aid stations. That food will be anywhere from salted potatoes to the sandwiches I was describing. Those are the ones I make myself, to peanut butter filled salted pretzels, to potato chips, all the yummy junk food that they serve at ultra running aid stations. Will I eat primarily that type of food? No, I'll stay away from the M&Ms and potato chips while I can. They even have pizzas and pierogies at some of these. But if I'm in dire need of some salt, or that's what's going to sustain me or keep me motivated and keep me going when it's 2 in the morning and I've been running for 20 hours, trust me, I won't hesitate to throw down a bunch of potato chips, M&Ms, and wash it back with some Coca-Cola. Also, when it comes to drink, that's a minimum of 7 gallons of water if we're thinking 25 hours. So hopefully closer to 8 or 9 gallons of fluid, but you can quickly see the amounts that are needed in order to just keep the body sustained at steady energy for this long of a race. In my pack that I'm running with, I'll always have that backup of gels and bars and chews and a few other smaller options, but those will basically be emergency needs in between aid stations. Hopefully I can keep that pack quite light. Aid stations are anywhere from 5 to 6 miles apart. The biggest gap is 11 miles early on, so hopefully I'll be well topped off to start the race so that I won't need that much for those first 11 miles, which, keep in mind, 11 miles, of which 6 of them are at 10% grade running uphill to 7,400 feet, means that it'll take a solid 3 hours just to get those 11 miles in. So yes, that's a long time, food and hydration wise, when you just think, oh, 11 miles, what's the big deal? But yeah, it will require some prep. Then the main crew aid stations, where I'll have my own food and my pacers and my crew, will be at miles 31, 45, and 67. So at 31, I'll sit down, I'll eat, I'll check in with my body, make sure I'm topped off fluids and everything's happening according to the original game plan. And if not, make the necessary adjustments, whether it's eating a little bit more at that crew aid station or also taking on a little bit more in my pack as I work my way to the next crew aid station. The good thing is, once you're running with a pacer, they keep you on it. They make sure that you're eating and drinking, and they herd and know whether you're behind, ahead, or how you're doing with regards to your fueling and hydration strategy. Race strategy, what does that look like for a 100-miler? Not much at all. There's not much of a strategy for this other than maintaining your race plan well, executing the race plan that I've set forth in my mind and talked about with my crew. And so there is just not allowing the mind or the spirit or the emotions to get too much of me while there's some peaks and valleys throughout this 25 to 30 hours. We all know what it's like racing endurance events. And so when those doubts come about, when those emotions become negative, it's often a good time to eat and drink. And so I'll try to remember that, practice what I preach. It's also knowing that this is the hurdle, this is the obstacle of 100 miles that I signed up for, and that is what will get done. So strategy, not really. It's getting these main sections of the race done. Get to mile 31, at which point I have my first pacer. Then get to mile 45, at which point I exchange pacers and I'm almost halfway. So it's all those mental hurdles to overcome as I'm moving through the course, the day, through all kinds of different climates and challenges. Finally, the biggest focus will then be to get to the final aid station at mile 67, final crew aid station, at which point it'll be dark and close to midnight. And there the focus will be keep moving forward, hopefully feeling somewhat okay, relatively okay when you're 100 kilometers into running. And the high point of the course is around mile 79 to 80. So getting to that point in the middle of the night, and then knock on wood that the body and the legs and the hip flexors hold up for the final 20 miles of lots of downhill. And no matter how good I feel, no matter how hydrated I am, how fueled I am, how energetic I am, if the legs lock up running downhill, it's miserable. So that is the biggest question mark when it comes to strategy and how the day will go that I have that's lingering out there, because I won't know until 80 miles into my day. Someone asked me about nerves, if I'm nervous for something like this. I don't really get nervous for something like this. I get nervous of thinking about the unknown, but I wouldn't say it's butterflies. It's, all right, well, how am I going to manage dealing with that? My last 100-mile race, there were about 10 miles of walking where I had some serious hip flexor, upper quad pain where the attachment was. No idea why. I think in hindsight, it might have been just running a flat course that steady for that long. And so hopefully the rolling altitude gain and loss of this course will make that a little better, but that brings on a whole new world of problems and challenges in will the legs and the quads hold up. So nerves, no, you have so much time. The pace is so slow and steady that you have so much time to course adjust, to stay positive, to talk to yourself, to do the mental games. But no, there's not a lot of nerves. It's more wondering what the day will bring, the unknown. The training I've done for this has prepared me as best as I can, so I feel pretty good about that. But the unknowns, the adventure of it, the unknowns, the questions. So there it is. I think that's it. I think I've gone through the race with all of you, what my questions are, how I go about it, how I prepared for it. Hopefully there was a lot of value in that for you. And even if there wasn't a lot of value, maybe some tidbits and some insight to why I preach the nutrition and hydration to so many of you, of simplifying it and understanding how your body reacts to so many different inputs on an ultra endurance day, whether that's an Ironman, whether that's a half Ironman or an ultra distance run. For a half Ironman, obviously with the intensity so much higher, it's a completely different strategy. But for Ironman, similarly, the intensities compared to what you're capable of doing, or how fast you're capable of running fresh, how fast you're capable or how many watts you're capable of pushing when you're fresh, how fast you're able to swim in the pool. When you put all that together and put it into an Ironman, the effort level and the intensities are actually quite lower. And so, again, you should be familiar with how your body reacts to solid foods, gels, liquids, all kinds of different inputs, and feel pretty good about how you're managing your fuel throughout a day that obviously gets harder the further you're into your day. Early in the swim and on the bike, you're still at a pretty comfortable stress level. The body has not gone through too many hours of pounding and stress and effort, so it can still absorb a lot of solid calories, a lot of water, and so forth. But as you get further into your day and the stress and the fatigue and the work your body has already gone through, it's probably going to require a shift in the fueling, whether that's completely to gels or first transitioning to chews, however it works for you, or even right away to liquid calories. But just know that there's many ways to go about your fueling and hydrating for a long day, and understand how your body reacts to all of them. Okay, sorry for the length of this one, and that's basically the Wasatch, the pre-Wasatch update. That's the end of this pod blast. I have a lot of emails and a lot of topics from all of you on things you'd like to hear, so this podcast will work quite well for many weeks because I have plenty of things to discuss. I will check in with you as I drive back the 10 to 11 to 12 hours, depending on how sore I am next week, and give you guys all an update on how the race went and what I observed and what I learned and what I would do differently. And we'll dive into some different topics after that pod blast, because we'll want to address the coaching and the methodologies and training and a lot of the topics you brought up as we move forward. Have a great few days. Have a great weekend. And for those of you racing this weekend, Santa Cruz 70.3, all the best. Good luck. Race well. And I hope to hear some great results on the other side.